Hi, Devan. Welcome.
Hello, how you doing, Samantha?
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me go ahead and kick off this. This is, of course, Experience Devolved, this webinar series. I'm so glad to have everybody here with us today. The point of this particular webinar is to explore how organizations lead, support, and connect with people that matter most. The series is built on real world challenges and opportunities to create more intentional, human-centered experiences for employees, clients, partners, and beyond. From the discover phase to strategy implementation, I look at how experiences are designed and lived in today's workplace. And today we're going to focus on a critical but often overlooked, part of the experience ecosystem, which is partner experience. It's not something that a lot of people think about when they think about the overall experience strategy. So we're going to talk about that, creating strong strategic partnerships that are grounded in trust, shared value, and mutual success. Of course, I'm Samantha Elizabeth. I am your host today. I'm the founder of Samantha Elizabeth Coaching and Consulting, and I also have Experienced Evolve Consulting. I have over 23 years of corporate leadership and experience strategy experience, and I've shifted into consulting to help organizations build more meaningful, people-centered cultures and systems. So whether it's employee engagement, client experience, and even partner and vendor experience, I help companies move from insight to action using a framework rooted in how people actually experience their work, not what it just looks like on paper. And so a lot of times people look at that and they see these are our data points. But certainly we want to look more into those insights of the data points. So I'm thrilled to have Devan Adams here. He's a principal analyst at Informa. Devan is known as the analyst alchemist. He's transforming channel data into actionable strategies for tech vendors and their partners. With a deep background in marketing research and a passion for human-centered strategy, Devan brings a rare blend of technical rigor and big picture thinking. He's led research and analysis for partner ecosystems across IT, and enterprise tech centers, and regularly speaks on how to align rewards, relationships, and ROI in the channel. What brought him here today is I saw that he had authored an article called Reward Partners for Every Mile Traveled. And that got me thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to be a great guest to have on this particular webinar so he can talk about the challenges and how we rethink how we value our partnerships, not just for results, but for effort and loyalty along the way. So, Devan, I am so excited to have you here. Is there anything that you wanted to add to your own intro?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the analyst alchemist part and how well it plays with what you do, with your expertise, right? You're talking about data and being able to transform into real world experiences, and my expertise is similar, right? In terms of gathering data, we have a great research organization that I work for within Informa Tech Target, specifically within the channel team, which is our Canalys group, and a huge 20,000 plus database of partners who we're gathering real world insights from and translating that into data driven results for our customers, which are usually like suppliers and vendors who we work with. So I just feel like it's a great match for us in terms of talking about experience, in particular partner experience, and being able to relay a lot of those results and a lot of that feedback that we get from our community of partners, and being able to use that to help businesses make better partner decisions.
Yeah, I think that's the tough thing. There's a lot of times that we have data or we have a lack of data. We don't know how to gather the data, and we might not have access to it. And I know I talk a lot of times with how to kind of unlock that kind of data that you need or create the data that you need and track it on a regular basis to make sure that it's aligned. But, it's not just the data, of course, it's the stories behind the data.
Exactly.
I know there's so many times that I go into a meeting and they present this chart, and the chart has some data points on it, and they say, okay, this is where we are, and we look at it and we go, okay, but what does that mean? So I love that you bring that up, because it's oftentimes that happens a lot of times in meetings. Somebody presents a chart, a graph, something that has some data points on it, and they circle something, but they don't really talk about, like, what do we do in order to be able to do that? Like, what are breaking down, because it's not just one thing that might be affecting that particular data point. But let's talk more about partner experience, not necessarily talking about data, but of course we're going to talk about it. So I have some questions for you today. So
Let's go.
I know you've worked across so many dimensions of channel and partner ecosystems. In your view, what makes a strong partner experience strategy?
Great first question.
Yeah.
Because I think what from a lot of the insights and a lot of the experience that I've had is it all starts with trust.
Mm,
And everyone should be able to relate to that because it starts with trust where you're talking about a relationship on a personal level. It starts with trust where you're talking about a relationship on a professional level,
mhm.
right? People have to feel like they trust you. They trust your insight. They trust your perspective. They trust your feedback. They trust the fact that you're giving them information that is coming from a good place. How
Yeah.
they accept that information is a whole different story, but at the same time, they trust the source, right?
Mm,
So for me, what makes a strong partner experience starts with trust.
mm,
And that's why, we've done research that says customers say they rely on the average of 7 partners who they trust during their buying journey, right?
yeah.
And that's strong because it goes back to they have 7 partners specifically who they feel like they can go to if they need advice on, what they need to do in terms of their tech decisions that they need to make within their organization. I also feel like along with that comes the fact that partners are value multipliers and not just value adders.
Mm,
We've done research with companies that we put out there. For example, AWS says that the partners can derive or can accumulate or generate $6.40 for every $1 AWS solutions that they sell.
mm,
Um, Looking at Google Cloud, for example, Jay said that partners can generate $7.05 for every $1 of Google Cloud platform that they sell. So it goes back to understanding the value add from a value multiplication standpoint, not just addition but multiplication at this
mm,
level of partnerships, and feeling like partners who are doing it the best are multiplying the most value are the ones who are delivering multiple services.
mm,
We've done research that shows that 80% of partners are actually providing 3 or more services. Those can be advising services, design, building. So understanding that a strong partner experience means, notifying that and being able to recognize the the value that partners are bringing um, throughout the customer journey, not just at the transaction level. And then also realizing how important partners are and within your business, as 70% of IT deals today are in one way or another partner influence, right?
mhm.
So being able to recognize how important partners are to your business growth and realizing how important that partner experience is something that I think is important in order to ensure that within your organization, the partner experience is prioritized and valued throughout.
Yeah, I want to add to that too, because you bring up trust, and that's something that I often talk about with employee engagement or employee experience is trust and leadership. Of course, with clients, it's trust in the product or service that you're providing. But when you talk about, partners and the trust is that that partner is going to represent the company well, or be able to partner with the company well, to be able to be able to get to vision or mission, that the company, is going towards. And I think that's a lot of, and it's a two-way street too. Especially, even with employees and clients and, partners too, that two-way street of trust, that you bring up, and, all of the data, and you also bring up the journey too. And when you're working with a company, many companies have like all of these different partners that they work with on, technology, on sales, like channel sales, if they're doing that. There's so many different things, and it's about putting together that, and realizing that that partner or even vendor experience, or that journey for partners and vendors may look like so many different segments, but they all have to flow. They all have to represent the company well. And, that's part of education for partners to be able to learn more about the company and who they are. And, so that way you can create a better partnership. I don't know how many times we're going to say partner or partnership, in this, but this is what it's about, right? But
We do an AI word count at the end and see how many times it comes up.
right.
Over under of 1,000. Well, I don't know what
Right. Somewhere in there. I do want to address your article, because, like I said, this is the one thing when I saw your article, I was like, oh man, you really need to come in and talk about this, because this is something that I don't think a lot of companies think about. But when they think about like employee experience or even client experience, they do think about rewards, rewards of not just what they get, from that person, or employee or client or something, but how do they create that loyalty, with them. So in your article, you talked about rewarding partners, not just for performance, but for the journey. So how can organizations reframe their partner incentives to reflect that philosophy?
Yeah, it's a process, right?
Mm,
The first stage starts with recognition.
yeah.
Because if you don't really see your partners as, you know, beyond the transactional lens, you're not
Mm,
even going to recognize uh, the other features, the other contributions that they can make and support you with. So
mhm,
first thing is recognition and being able to assess the role that your partners play throughout their entire customer buying journey before and after the sale, not just at the point of sale, right?
mm,
And realizing, you know, for me, right, being able to realize that, some of the research that we've done is, 36% of partners want that recognition, right? That
mm,
was the number one option in a survey that we did was, partners said that the number one thing they wanted to be was recognized for all the activities that they do across the
mm.
customer journey.
Yeah.
And the thing that partners really felt like they had the most value for, or could produce the most value for, were things that they were doing pre-sale, right, before
Mm,
even got to the transaction stage. So those advisory, those consulting services that they're providing, which are slowly leading the customer in a direction of making a sale, and being able to be recognized for that, and being able to see how should you as a vendor reward that.
mhm,
And we got data that says that the number one thing that partners want to be rewarded, the number one way that partners would want to be rewarded is cash. Right,
mhm.
they want to be paid like cash. The other things on the list, the top three were, second was vacations,
Yeah.
so an experience vacation or something like that, and the third was gift cards. So just thinking about it from that perspective, right? You want to fully recognize your partners. You want to keep them loyal, like you just
Mhm.
mentioned. Um, but you have to show the that you're recognizing their value that they're bringing, and you have
Yeah.
to reward them properly for that. So I think the way I think of it is think of partner incentives like a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Mhm.
So you should reward them for every mile that they're traveling throughout that marathon, and not just when they reach the finish line.
Right. Yeah. I mean, think about like a lot of people and a lot of companies, understand employee experience and recognition, rewards and recognition, and that. and all of the different milestones that an employee might go through.
Mhm.
So they might reward an employee for signing on, with them, for, actually getting employment with them is like, here's a bonus, for that. You've completed onboarding. Great. Here's an incentive for that. And we think about like the partner experience too. You can kind of think of it in the same way. What are the
Yeah.
major milestones that you want to reward? Because in actuality, rewards and recognition, the very core of it is what behaviors do you want to see? So,
Exactly.
what behaviors for partners do you want to see along the line? And how can you reward, for that too? And a lot of like what I teach too within rewards and recognition is it's not always the tangible things like money or gifts or things like that. It can be other things too, like does the partner on their own website get to say that they're partnering with you? Some companies are very private about that, and some companies are like, absolutely, let's advertise that we work together.
Branding.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Let's put it on, our shared social media pages as well too, that we're partnering together and this is the great work we're doing together. Or anything like that. And you got to think about like what are some free things that you can do that kind of elevate your brand and elevate the stories that you're telling within your company too. Those are also rewards in recognition, for different partners that you could work with. So thinking beyond, that, but you do bring up a very valid point because as a partner too, you're working together, you're like in a B2B relationship and, you're there to mutually benefit each other, and a
Yeah.
lot of it is money, like
Yeah.
sure, some recognition
Yeah.
on social media can give, somebody a little bit more clout, in their branding or
Yeah.
something like
If
that.
someone's making $100 million and you're on the side making 1,000, and
But
you may be you may be the farm person and feel like money's not a big object for you, but at the
right.
same time you want to get your fair share as well, right? So
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know
definitely.
money
Well,
matters at some point.
I was just, I just watched Jurassic Park, the newest Jurassic Park
Oh,
yesterday.
really? Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet.
actually, it is like something that popped up in it. So they had said like, "Hey, we'll give you 10 and 6 zeros," and they were like, "So that 10, that zero and that 10 does not include the 6 zeros. So they're going to give it at $10 million." And they said, "Well, how much is this worth to you?" And they said, "It's worth trillions." And it was kind of like, so you're only giving me $10 million for something that you're going to make trillions on or something. And this is the
Exactly.
core. This is exactly what you need. Not to give away the story or anything like that, but like that was one of those things that was like they should have asked for like 100 million because that's even still a
Mhm.
drop in the bucket for the trillions of dollars that they're going to get from this. But it's like that. I mean, partners do look at it that way as well too. Like, what value am I bringing you? And in that case for Jurassic Park, the value that they were bringing them was the core of exactly what they needed in order to make those trillions of dollars. So
Mhm.
not to be, greedy in that, but like maybe they should have asked for more money or something, especially because it was a dangerous mission. But,
Yeah.
like that was like affecting people's lives, and stuff, to be able to go on that mission. But anyway,
I'm gonna throw this out there, not to get us on a tangent, but
yeah,
you
go
brought
ahead.
it up. You brought it up. Jurassic partnerships. There you go. This I just threw it out there. You were talking about Jurassic Park. I'm like, Jurassic
Are you
partnership
making
sounds pretty
trillions of
cool.
dollars on your, this partnership? Maybe you should consider giving them a little bit more. No, it's just like an
I like
advertisement
it.
for partners, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's talk a little bit about when companies start to think about partner experience or PX as we call it in some cases. Where do you think they actually should start in that? Like if they're brand new to thinking about partner experience, I mean, they have partners, they just really haven't thought about the partner experience at all. Where should they start?
Um, they should start with understanding kind of like the viewpoint of the partner,
Mm,
which is what partners should also be looking at,
Mm,
which are those 28 moments before the customer makes a purchase, like what's influencing their behavior.
yeah.
Right? What are those things that are influencing the behavior of customers, of the end customers?
Hmm.
And some of those things include, social media,
Yeah.
um, the conferences and events that they're attending,
Hmm.
the podcasts, the peer groups, community forums, magazines, online websites, analyst firms like Canalys and Inform Tech, who I work for. So, just understanding that those things are influencing uh, the partners,
Hmm.
but also those partners are also paying close attention to the things that a customer are also being influenced by as well. So,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like step one in terms of you want to get to know how you should be, you know, interacting with partners and understanding
Hmm.
the partner point of view,
Yeah.
and what the ideal partner experience should look like is starting
Hmm.
off there and
Yeah.
understanding those things that are influencing the customer journey that partners are also looking at, so that you go both can kind of align on, okay, like you were mentioning before, coming up with a cohesive strategic plan that's shared, that's mutual between
Yeah.
both the vendor and the partner, both understanding, what's the goal of the relationship, and then how to meet that goal. And at the end
Hmm.
of the day, the ultimate goal is, customer satisfaction. And
Yeah.
you figure that out by understanding the customer journey and all the things that they're doing, that influence their decision making.
You bring up another very valid point too, and that is the experience ecosystems of employees and clients and partners and everything. They're all intertwined in some way.
Very much.
They all affect each other too. As you were talking to, I often think about like some companies unfortunately use, and this is a punishment thing, but sometimes they use their partners as scapegoats of like why something went wrong, right? And it's damaging, of course, to that other company if they're pointing to like, oh, hey, our vendor, completely failed us or something. Or our partner or the person that was supposed to deliver, something, too. And I know like oftentimes it's that, kind of partnership. But like I've worked with, for instance, FedEx to get things out to people, and it's that trust, hopefully, that whatever tracking that they put on a particular package, or item or something like that's true, and there were some times that I'm going to be honest with you, when things would go wrong, we'd be like, oh, it's FedEx's fault or something like that, but like, is that the truth? Did we not send it out in time or something like that? But and that was like the terrible thing of thinking back to like that we used our partner as a scapegoat of like why we didn't deliver something on time. I mean, in actuality, it could have been like an issue with like weather or something like that to ship something, somewhere. And it's like, which case, like that is, I remember one time in Houston, our huge mailing distribution caught on fire. And
Wow.
they had a whole like section of the mailing center that was completely down, and mail was really slow. And we had something to deliver, like something, communications wise, for clients to get out that was very timely. It didn't happen on time. And then, like
Wow.
at that time, it was kind of like that is something that we can affect. But I don't know how many times in client meetings where somebody would say like, well, can you? We're like, well, the mailing center, like, like pointing to that like as the thing. But like in actuality, that is a risk that you often take with that smooth journey, that it's not a smooth journey all the time. And just making sure that you understand, and also like giving people grace too, because I know for like my clients, when we were trying to get things out through that mailing distribution center, there were so many times that they would get so angry about it. And we were just like, like there's nothing that we can do, and they're like, well, can't you call them, can't you make them? And it's like, well, now, I mean, it is a government. Like
Right,
it's
right.
the postal service. You can't call the postal service. I mean, it was just it was kind of crazy because there was no grace involved in those particular things, and it came back to it, and there was a lot of times that we actually had to eat costs because we were
Mhm.
late, on things because of that. And I know that's just like one partnership that we had, and it's a partnership that we necessarily could not control. It's not like I can contact the postmaster and say, do your job better, build another wing or something like that in the mailing center, get our things done, or something like that. I mean, just like I had no sway of that. We just had to give each other grace, at that time,
Yeah.
and make sure. But like I had scapegoats,
Now
there was
you bring up a very good point, um, because we're talking about partnerships,
yeah,
but in all actuality, when I think of partnerships, I really just think of it from the sense of ecosystem, right? It's
yeah,
an ecosystem of everything.
hmm,
Every person that plays a role or has an impact directly or indirectly. And
yeah,
in your case, right, you don't think of FedEx as being part of that ecosystem, but it
yeah,
is, right? Like they are actually call them a silent partner in that in that business that you are in. So, whether you like it or not, yeah, the FedEx was part of that partnership. They were more probably of a silent partner, but
yep,
whoever you're working with from a delivery standpoint had an impact and influence on the business relationship.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And oh yeah, I mean, like you bring up a really good point. The silent partners, that we have too. I mean, even think about it like our internet service. How many
Mm.
times like you worked in an office, they're like, well, the internet's down today. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna take out a piece of paper. And I remember one time working at the large technology company that we both worked for. I
Mhm.
remember one time the internet was down for like 2 days in one of the buildings. And like either people had to move to another building, but I remember my boss got out like pieces of paper and was like, I'm going to draw the slides. That I'm going to present the drawn slides instead of, because we could not present the slides, virtually. It was kind of a
Ah,
funny thing, but like it brings up that business continuity plan that you have, that like if something were to fail and it's something that you cannot, I mean, in this case it was the wireless provider that we had, and that we could not do anything with that. So it wasn't like something IT was responsible for. I mean, it was of course their partnership, but overall it was something that, hey, there's a stoppage of what we normally do in our process, and hey, we need to figure out an alternative to that. And I mean, in actuality, there's a lot of things that we rely on today that if it were to go down, we'd be like, well, we're dead in the water, like, that sort of thing. So kind of crazy, but anyway. Let's talk about the ecosystem because we touched upon it. And when I consider an ecosystem, of course, in any experience, I consider the people, of course, the processes and the tools, the technology, what we were just talking about.
Yep.
So, which one do you think organizations tend to underinvest in when it comes to partnerships, and what is the impact of that?
Oh, that's an easy one. It's
Yeah.
always people. It's always people. I mean, so people always get the raw end of the stick,
Mhm.
because they feel like we're expendable, which depending on what you're doing and where you're at, it could be the case. But yeah, I feel like that's always the thing that's most underinvested in.
Mm.
Um, Tools and processes are always feel like most important. People are always looking for the next best tool, and
Yeah.
pretty solid on their process. Feel like their processes are pretty solid and can last throughout the lifetime or make improvements as needed. But
Mm.
um, it's the people, and the human element is always what I feel is underrated. And
Yeah.
especially now, right? Because we're living in a time where people are more feeling like AI can do everything. We don't need people anymore to do a lot of stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's only gonna get worse as time goes on. And the value of people are gonna feel like a lot less.
Hmm.
But it also leads to what we were talking about before was being able to establish relationships, right?
Yeah.
And using trust as a builder of those relationships
Hmm.
to really spark that human element,
Hmm.
especially in the channel and the partner ecosystem. So
Yeah.
ensuring that the people are continue to remain top of mind, and their importance within the entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. People relationships, that's sometimes underrated as far as what makes a great partnership, with
Mhm.
people is like that. And I'm working, with a company right now, and they're doing a huge new system, for their whole organization. And this new system, that's coming in, that's one thing that I advise them is that they said, well, the company that we're working with, the technology company that we're working with, they have a project manager, and that project manager is going to come in and they're going to give us the whole implementation timeline and everything. And we've got a whole team of people. But the problem is that with that whole team of people, that one project manager on their side was talking to so many different people, and it was so segmented that I was like, you need to have one person that understands the needs and the wants and everything of all of these different groups rather than all of these different groups talking
Mhm.
to that. And so that was creating the people partnership that's a lot of times underrated when it comes to that. So it's like you need kind of like a one-to-one type of relationship with them, because they have one person that's the single point of contact. You also need to have one person that's the single point of contact, so it's one-to-one and not one to many, and because that one-to-many, unfortunately, when you're working on an implementation of a new technology or something, that often can be very segmented if it's, where that one person is talking to so many different people and all of them are expressing their wants and needs. It can explode as far as like the scope of the particular project, because they're not aligning on their wants and needs and, things like that. So that's an important part that you bring up is, people. And I know that people have heard me talk about this before too, because you bring up another great point is AI. And studying psychology, one thing I knew about psychology or the brain and everything is that we have many different layers to our brain. And within our society, we have many different layers of things that we go through. So like our brain, we've got our lizard brain, which is the reactionary brain, is the fight, flight, or freeze. We've got our binary brain, which is where we only see things, as black and white. There's no gray area there. And then we have our prefrontal cortex, which is seeing things in gray. And I bring this up too because in our society, we've done the same thing where we had the industrial era, and people were literally cogs in the machine. And with that, people were treated like machines. A lot of companies are still stuck in that particular era, even though we've moved into the knowledge era, which is where people are now not just the machine, but they are the intelligence behind the machine. And now we've got AI, which is the intelligence to the intelligence, right? So a lot of times, like as people are thinking about moving into the AI era, they're forgetting. I mean, just like our brains were built on, like each of our layers of our brain are built on top of each other in order to support each other, in order to become more intelligent. So, with that, we've got the industrial area, which is the machines, the knowledge era, which is, the people. And then, of course, we've got the AI era. And it's supposed to build upon each other. We rely on the machines, we rely on the knowledge of the people, but we certainly don't replace machines with people. And we certainly don't replace AI with people. It all works together. So, that's something that you bring up, and with people working together and supporting, each other and everything, you got to think back to like what machines, can we use to support the people to support the AI,
Right.
rather than we're just going with AI and get rid of the people, because that's the problem with it a lot of times, is getting rid of the people. But anyway, I went down a rabbit hole myself. I apologize.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Sounds like a topic for another episode.
Definitely. But this is all related, because as we talk about people, processes, and tools, we look at that, and we look at with AI coming in and everything, it is, replacing people in the mundane, repetitive, kind of tasks, just to
Exactly.
allow us to be able to have the higher value work. That's always, something that companies have always looked for, is getting people to that higher value work rather than them being the cogs in the machine, because there's literally cogs in the machine already, that can be used, where AI can come in and help to fulfill that. And doesn't necessarily require somebody that has higher thinking, to be able to do that. So anyway, it's an interesting thing, because we also look at like AI and partner experience too. There are so many bots that companies are building to be able to handle the many inquiries that partners might have, or even employees and clients, too, or customers. You go to a website and a bot pops up and says, "How can I help you today?" So it's that, kind of thing. But in actuality, when you create like a partner, a partnership, like that's people. It's not necessarily people to technology,
Hmm.
kind of partnership. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I apologize.
All good.
Let's talk a little bit about, so I mean, like for my kind of, I want to say like my phased approach that I have. I normally go with the discover phase, which is the data, gathering the data you already have, creating new data that you need in order to be able to design a better experience, in order to be able to implement it as well too. And then of course, like turn around and analyze how you did. That's the strategy that I go with. And I do look at that with partner relationships as well too, is discovering the data and stuff. So where do you see, like, as far as like discover, design, implement, and analyze, where do you see the breakdown in a partner experience more?
Yeah. So I saw your kind of strategy, and I
Mhm.
was intrigued by it. I will say I was
Hmm.
intrigued by it. Because it relates to a lot of what we do in in my organization.
Yeah.
Um, and we talk about kind of those roles that partners play, and kind of like the land expand type of
Yeah.
strategies as well.
Mm.
And the way I thought of it was, looking at strategies as you have within yours around discover, design, implement, and analyze. Like
Mm.
I tried to map that to some of the insights that we have,
Hmm.
and what I came up with was looking at it from discover perspective.
Mm.
For me, that's being able to map out the 15 key influential spheres in a partner's network to understand their partner's needs, right?
Yeah.
If you're a vendor, you need to understand the events that they go to, the forums that they're in, the peer groups that they're associated with, the media that they're, reading, um, the analyst firms that they're using or that they're, supplying information with, like our kind of Faro community
Yeah.
supplies us with information. You need to know and understand that. You need to, from the design standpoint, it's all about co-creating solutions,
Mm.
and those solutions need to align with what we were talking about before, the 28 moments before a buyer makes a purchase decision, right?
Mm.
So co-creating solutions that are aligned with those buyer decision making ideas. From the implement standpoint, it's really around ensuring partners have the tools, right? We just talked about in the last segment about tools and understanding you're equipping and you're enabling partners by providing them with the tools they need to deliver the services they provide.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those are multiple services. We were
Mhm.
talking about before about 80% of partners delivering three or more services. So not just providing them with one tool to you know help them and support them in one service, but all the services that they're capable of delivering
Yeah.
is important. And then analyzing, and that's a fun one for me, right? So
Yeah.
being able to use metrics and measure your partners accordingly, based on the
Mhm.
services that they're delivering, based on the multiplier add and the multiplier value that they're providing, throughout the customer journey.
Yeah.
Doing CSAT scores and combining them with CSAT scores to get a real view of how much that they're contributing to the success of your company, the partnerships that you have with them. And for me, just based on my experience, I know and understand that it's often over underrated,
Mhm.
and taken for granted that many suppliers don't dedicate enough time to the most important part before you even get to the discovery phase,
Yeah.
which is understanding the personas of
Yeah.
partners,
Oh, yeah. That's a great
right?
one.
There's so many different partners, right? And you
Mhm.
need to understand the persona, the type of partner that is ideal for you and your solutions.
Yeah.
Um, Before you even really start getting into those other things. So, being able to kind of at least have some understanding of the type of partners that you think would be best to
Mhm.
work with.
Yeah. You bring up some really great points, and thank you, so much for your more insight, to that. So that's good. Speaking of measurement though, I mean, because that's always tricky. What KPIs or feedback mechanisms actually give the most insight to partner experience, in your opinion?
I think for me, it's understanding how you're getting feedback. Like
Mm,
w- for for our organization, it's easy because we are a third party,
yeah.
right? And knowing that we can go and query on behalf of a vendor to get their real perspective,
Yeah.
right? And not feel like, the vendor querying them and who knows who's going to see that information and they say it's anonymous, so is it really anonymous, right? Those type
Yeah.
of
That's true.
conflicts of interest, like
Yeah.
we can help eliminate that.
Yeah.
So being able to have like a third party firm really query partners on, understanding like how good they feel like the relationship, or good or bad, the relationship is with the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, another thing that I think is very important is, not only querying partners on, that relationship that they have with vendors, but also understanding that, you know, there are other partners who may not work with the vendor right now
Right.
to get their perspective about the vendor and why they may not be working with them, right?
True.
So I think that's a way to really get the best value from doing any type of surveying of partners
Mm-hmm.
is to use a third party to really get the true feedback that they need.
Yeah.
And that's how I think that's the best way of measuring satisfaction.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, because all too often I do see, like, in gathering feedback, either you pick a couple of your favorite, clients, or it's like, you're the best, or something, or you're like, you pick and choose like what data, to actually like get from, or you might be asking the wrong questions, or like, you might be asking the right questions but at the wrong time, and those are all of those kind of considerations to ask. And then also, like, how do you ask? Do you put out like an anonymous survey? Do you actually have like a sit down conversation and kind of interview them, if you will, on, getting their feedback? Depending on the mood of the people, like right at the same time too, like snapshot. I mean, there's so many different factors to consider in gathering feedback and knowing that you're gathering, all of the feedback. And I know they're like, as a budding experienced person too, like I would sit there and read like survey results, of asking for feedback. And I would not only like look at the data, but I would read every single comment. And there are some more emotional comments that would kind of break through for me as the reader, that I'd be like, oh my gosh, we need to solve that. And I remember, like I said, as a budding person, I would say, like, well, somebody said on the survey this, so we need to fix this, because they were very passionate about it in their comments. And the leader was like, how many people actually said that though? And I was like, well, it's just that one comment, like, but it was so passionate in the comments. I felt like, as an empath, like I was like, oh
Like
my
the
gosh,
eighty
that poor
twenty.
person, they're struggling, they're, really hurting. And like that,
It's that 80/20 rule.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We experience that a lot, right? You have you have your quiet 80 and your loud 20.
yeah,
And the loud 20 are really ones shouting from the springboards like the earth is falling, and you got your quiet 80 who don't see it the same way, but usually changes are made by the ones who scream the loudest. So
yeah,
yeah, it's up to us, like as a research firm, to really put things in perspective and say, okay, we're looking at the whole sample size, and we gotta put things in perspective in terms of is what's really like a huge issue versus one or two people who have a very strong opinion about something that may or may not be as dramatic as some may think.
yeah. You you bring up something, like going back to trust, going back to what we started this conversation with, is trust too, because when somebody responds and gives feedback, of course, like that initial trust is there to say, like, you're going to actually listen to my feedback and you're actually going to make a change based on my feedback. But when they start to see that companies are not doing that, companies that they partner with, they're going to start losing trust in that company, and they're going to become silent, even though they're struggling, even though they're having a hard time. They're like, what's the point? What's the point of me giving this feedback or improving this relationship with this company when they're just going to continue to ignore my feedback? And in some cases, some companies that are paying partners to do something, they might just say, well, shut up and, like, deal with it, or something like that. I paid you, but they don't consider that, like, kind of relationship too, because the partner might be overcharging them just because they're a difficult client to work with or something. And there's so many like different factors involved in that, and it goes back to like what you said, is that under people, processes, and tools, it's the people that are normally the point of conflict. And if you don't have a great relationship and you're not creating that or cultivating that within your own culture of your business too, to create great partnerships, with your partners or vendors or clients and employees and everything, you're really hurting your overall experience ecosystem. So anyway, you bring up a
Exactly.
really great point. We do need to wrap up though a little bit. I do want to make sure that you have some, final thoughts. I do want you to, bring forth too, because everybody knows this, have seen this kind of webinar before. I have like a million questions. We never get to all of the questions. So is there anything that you would like to bring up and everything? Maybe like a small step to kind of get started on partner experience, or, anything that you actually wanted to bring up, as your final thoughts.
Yeah, I would say, my final thoughts is really kind of like a summation of what we've been talking about, right? It starts with trust.
Mhm.
It starts from there to, okay, once you have the trust established and you're starting to get into more relationship with partners, you maybe
Mhm.
you've signed on a few partners, and you got them on board, but it's really a transactional relationship.
Yeah.
The next step is recognition, right? And being able to recognize fully what your partners are bringing to the table for you that
Mm-hmm.
goes beyond the transactional part of it, right? And that takes effort, right? You have to want to know, how much value the partners are bringing and going outside of just what comes up on the receipt.
Yeah.
So that's the next thing is, being able to get that full recognition and fully recognize your partners and the value that they're providing.
Yeah.
Um, and then feedback, right? So we were talking about a few minutes ago, how you as a vendor, for example, are catering to your partners and creating that partner satisfaction or measuring that partner satisfaction is
Yeah.
by getting their feedback, understanding, how they feel about the relationship, also understanding, the role that they're playing in that customer journey that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
being able to allow them to express like this is what we're doing,
Yeah.
this is how much value we feel like we're bringing. In your Jurassic Park example, right? You're making billions and we're only making thousands, right? So
Yeah.
that type of feedback would be important, for a vendor to know how the partner feels about the relationship. And at the end of the day, it's uh, the partner experience is like planting the seed, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
small effort in order to grow over time
Yeah.
to become a thriving ecosystem. But it happens in steps. It happens over time. It happens with trust being built over, a certain period of time. So that would be my kind of like final wrap up to summarize kind of all we've talked about today.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you bring up in the journey. There's also time that needs to be, to be able to build that trust as well.
Exactly.
Um, Giving grace as well. We talk about that too, because everybody's human and we have technology, we have issues.
We're
We
not
have,
all robots.
right, yeah, exactly, mail centers that burn down, that sort of thing. I mean, there's so many different things that could happen, but being able to build in, some risk factors into there and, to kind of address that risk, up front, that business continuity. But once again, it goes back to grace. Yeah, because we're not robots, we're humans and things happen, along the way. Well, great.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. What I will do is I will link your LinkedIn profile, of course, in this video, so people can get a hold of you if you're
Awesome.
open for them to ask you questions or
Definitely.
anything like that. Yeah.
Definitely.
And then also, what I'll do is, if anybody does have any questions, though, based on this, please put it in the comments, and I'll certainly tag Devon if he, if it's a question that he can answer, or we can kind of tag too many questions. But it was great being able to have this conversation with you today, and I really hope that everybody got something from this as far as partner experience and starting to think about their own partner experience, and understanding what it's like to build a strong partnership for your company, why it's important too. Like, how is it involved in the overall ecosystem? So, I do invite everybody to connect with us, to be able to ask any questions that they have. We'll certainly answer any of those questions. DM us, or what do they call it? InMail, on LinkedIn. But anything, if you do have any thoughts on this. But hopefully everybody took something away today. So, and thank you so much for being on the webinar and giving us all of your insight. I really appreciate it. And based on any of the questions that people might have, I might have you come back and we can even talk further about this. Of course, the millions of questions that we didn't even get to, too.
It must be a part two. So yes,
Yeah.
I appreciate Samantha for everything and having a great conversation. We have some very, similar experience as people can probably recognize, but we also come from, different points of views and,
Right.
our different roles. So it's great to see that there's alignment there. And you are now part of my ecosystem and I'm part of yours. So there we
Yay,
go.
all right. Well, very awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you everybody for being here today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.